there. Welcome to the Experience Ship podcast. I'm Brittany.
And I'm Danlee.
And we have a fun story today.
In the last episode, part 1, I'm Home, the Life of Bill Parr, we talked about Bill's experience in the Merchant Marines, the U.S. Army, what it was like to be drafted, and eventually discharged.
And today is part 2 of the interview, where we dive into the next chapter of Bill's life. So stay tuned at the end, where we discuss the episode.
Speaking of Eisenhower and this time of history, you're really living through a lot of pretty eventful things. So backing up a little bit, Pearl Harbor. This is in 1941, so this is before you're in the Army. Can you tell me about your experience?
I was 14 years old. When you hear about Pearl Harbor, it's kind of like our nation, now people remember where they were, what they were doing at 9/11.
Yeah.
And I remember I was at Jack's house up in his bedroom, and the radio was on, and they announced that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor.
Wow.
This made it a solemn.
Yeah.
It was on a Sunday afternoon.
Do you think that you guys or anybody in your family or you or Jack, anyone saw this coming? I mean, what was your thoughts?
Nobody saw the Japanese doing this.
Yeah.
They did. This was a secret operation as it could possibly be. It was unexpected. Roosevelt knew that Japanese were not friendly, but there was a 3-man Japanese envoy that was talking with the president, talking peace at the time.
At the time.
At the time. And so immediately they were sent home.
Wow.
Disgraced, because it was completely unannounced, unexpected, talking peace, and yet all the time sailing toward Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, that's really scary to be a child. I mean, because like you mentioned 9/11, that's an experience I remember being a kid, but we were watching the news. You're listening to the radio. I suppose it's kind of a similar feeling, but you're just looking at this thinking, what's going to happen?
Yeah, suddenly.
What's going to happen to our country?
Yes, that very day, Roosevelt said that he was declaring a declaration of war.
He declared war
against Japan.
And that's when the United States really entered World War II.
And then just a couple of days later, he declared the same thing against Germany.
Yeah.
Frankly, we all thought he wanted to go to war against Germany. He wanted to help the British and the French. But Congress, we just felt like we've got oceans on each side of us. Nobody can touch us. Different world than it is now.
Yeah.
You know, airplanes could barely make it across the ocean.
Yeah, that's wild.
And so there was no way, they're not going to attack us. There's no way they could attack us. Roosevelt felt like we're going to be needed, that this is going to be a world war. And so eventually he got us into it.
Well, and Roosevelt was behind the Manhattan Project, which was the development of the atomic bomb.
Yes.
Which the President Truman, who ultimately made the decision to use those bombs, didn't even know was being developed until he became president.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing. He did not know that. But when Harry Truman was put on the ballot as vice president, I don't even think Roosevelt knew who he was.
Really?
It
was a political
move. It was just
move.
Politics to make sure that Missouri was in the camp. But Harry Truman was like us. He was a businessman. He had a small clothing business.
Yeah.
A shop.
Okay.
Not a business, a shop. He sold clothes.
Wow.
In Independence, Missouri. That's what he did, and was a councilman. And then some political organization made him a senator. And then he became vice president under Truman, just to make sure that they got enough votes, Missouri. So, but it wasn't intended. In my estimation, he turned out to make some of the greatest decisions
We were talking about this a little bit.
there ever was.
Yeah, because I asked you yesterday, because, I've been really curious about this era and the atomic bombs and Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And, you told me about how it felt when you heard on the news about Pearl Harbor, but how did it feel? I mean, you didn't see these atomic bombs coming, right? You didn't know that was happening. Nobody did. So
No.
what happened when you heard about that first bomb on Hiroshima?
Well, he rather explained that he wanted the Japanese to surrender unconditionally. And then when he dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, they hardened.
Yeah.
But when he dropped the bomb on Nagasaki, they surrendered.
It's crazy that it took that, because they lost
if they had
so
not,
many people.
If they had not, we were beginning to win the war against Japan. We were beginning to take back island by island, but every island had such a cost of lives, like Iwo Jima and Guam. And every island just took so many lives that Harry Truman just thought, we need to end this. We don't need, either side needs to lose no more lives. And so the second bomb, Japan thought, boy, the next one might be on Tokyo.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it.
I mean, they lost thousands, 146,000 deaths in Hiroshima.
Right.
80,000 in Nagasaki.
You think that's a lot, and if humanity, you think, oh, they shouldn't have. It's better the enemy dies and the enemy's people die than our people die.
Well, that's what
they were the aggressors, and to end the war, he did that. And it probably grated on him the rest of his life.
Sure,
but it's a thing that had to be done.
Yeah. From what I've been reading, Robert Oppenheimer was one of the famous scientists that developed and led the Manhattan Project and built the atomic bombs and designed them. It just sounds like a lot of those scientists and politicians have had a really heavy weight to carry their entire lives after that. After
and
those
the German
decisions.
Werner von Braun. We were working on that in Germany.
The German scientists.
The Germans were working on that.
Yeah.
But they never came close.
And then Russia's involvement was interesting because of Fuchs, the spy on the Manhattan Project, who essentially stole the blueprints for the atomic bomb.
That's what Russia does. And then they would claim they invented it. Russia was never an intelligent nation. The people are as normal as anybody, but always under oppression of a dictator who never allowed them to be or go anywhere. So Russia's never been strong. They've had a lot of people.
Yeah.
But their armies had never been armies that you would fear. They had a lot of them, but they weren't good soldiers because they didn't have anything to fight for. You know, when you're attacking somebody to take their territory, I'm a soldier. I don't care. I'm not getting anything out of this.
So the army's not strong, which is quite the contrary. From
and it shows right now in Ukraine. Those soldiers aren't giving it their best. If it weren't for shelling and bombing, Ukraine would have won, but they've destroyed all the buildings.
So I want to talk about Jack a little bit, because you told me, just thinking about the Manhattan Project and the atomic bombs.
After he got out, he went to work with the atomic people, and he worked a lot of that stuff.
But you said that it was top secret, so he really actually didn't share a lot of it.
He didn't share any of it.
Your best friend.
I didn't even know it till later.
That's crazy. And I read that a lot of people that worked on the Manhattan Project didn't even know they were working on it. Some people didn't.
Jack never talked about it, even afterwards.
How did you ever find that out?
His wife told me.
Yeah. So Jack was in the Air Force. So
the Army Air Force.
It was called the Army Air Force.
There wasn't an Air Force as such. There was a Naval Air Force, Army Air Force, the Marine Air Force.
And so he was in the Air Force at the time that you were in the Merchant Marines? Yeah. And what did he do?
He was a bombardier. Never went overseas. I don't know why. Never asked him why, but he spent all his time.
Like a lot of training.
And I think he probably did some teaching. Because he was good.
He said he was a really smart engineer.
Very intelligent. He had an engineer's degree. Very intelligent.
And sounds like you'll have some really contrasting experience in the Army and the Air Force, the Merchant Marines. I want to hear more about Jack. It sounds like he knows you pretty well.
He's 2.5 years older than I, but he seemed to treat me like an equal, even though he had to teach me. Honestly, raised up in foster homes, I learned more about life from Jack.
Really?
Because Jack's father, he knew his father before his father died. And so he knew some things that I had no idea.
Was Jack in foster homes?
No, Jack lived with his mother.
Oh, okay, but not with his father.
No, his father had died.
I see.
And so he and his mother, and he has a sister a little younger than he. They moved down 3 houses down from us. Well, he hadn't been there long before we got our bicycles together. And suddenly we were best friends. But I was younger than he was, but he didn't seem to even care or notice that, except if I didn't know something, he would gladly explain without saying you're dumb or something.
He cared about you.
He really cared. He really cared. I like to use the word love. And all through our lives, we grew up together. And then he went in the Army, and then I went in the Merchant Marine, and then in the Army. But before I got discharged, just before he was discharged, he had a Ford convertible.
Oh.
And he and his wife Lois, he'd met her in Las Vegas. On the spur of the moment, got married.
Wow.
He and his wife came down and picked up Vera and Jim from Dallas and brought them down to San Antonio. One weekend, and I got a pass, and we went off and over to the lake where the caverns are, and just enjoyed a weekend.
That's so sweet.
Spent a night. We found a motel where we get one room for the four of us, but we put a blanket. We put a line and a blanket between their bed and our bed.
A little privacy screen.
Yeah. But we were that close.
Yeah.
We were that close.
You said that you ran a paper route together.
Yeah, we had a paper route together. And then when Jack got a job as a soda jerk, drugstores and pharmacies used to have a sandwich shop, we call it, a soda fountain. And he got a job. And the first time they needed somebody, he got the guy to hire me. So we worked together at this pharmacy at Haskell and Live Oak in Dallas for maybe a year until the war came.
And do you have any really fun memories, just the two of you?
On any Saturday, of course, we rode our bikes everywhere. No kids had cars then. I mean, most families had one car. And so we rode our bikes everywhere.
Yeah.
And on Saturday, these were great times. We would, late Friday afternoon, we would take our bikes apart, wheels and all, and grease them up, oil them up good. And then Saturday morning, as fast as we could get away, we would take off. You don't know Dallas, but Dallas has a lake, a big lake, or Lake Dallas. When I was a kid, it seemed like an ocean, but it probably covered maybe 100 acres.
Decent sized lake.
And we would drive all around White Rock Lake, which was 21 miles.
Wow.
And come back home and throw our paper routes. We had afternoon paper routes.
Wow.
And I mentioned to you, we made rubber guns.
Oh, yeah. Can you describe that again? Because it is really interesting.
Apples came in boxes that had a 12 by 12 by one end of it. And we would take that end and saw it off in the shape of a gun. And we would get all tires then, every tire had an inner tube. And inner tubes were made out of rubber. And we would take an old inner tube and slice into rubber bands.
Wow.
Big rubber bands. We would get a clothespin and fasten the clothespin onto the handle of that wood. And then we would get a rubber band, put it on one end, and double it up and stick it in the clothespin. And when you open the clothespin, it shot the rubber band sometime 10 feet.
Wow. I kind of want to try that, but I don't know where I'd get
and
an
so
inner
we would try to hit one another with
That's really sweet.
not just us, but all the kids in the neighborhood
Yeah.
play together with those things.
Yeah. Y'all were creative.
We had a marvelous time. Well, you had to be. There weren't phones, there wasn't any television. You just played, and you had to make up games and make up. If it were winter, we played cards.
Yeah.
We played war. And Jack knew how to play bridge, so I learned how to play. So we played a lot of bridge.
Yeah.
And rummy. Anything you can play with cards,
You've played a lot of games throughout your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always enjoyed, still enjoy it. But all the time, we were always doing something like that together.
Yeah. And in your letters to Mima, one of them, or to Vera, that I was just looking at, you actually told her your scores for your dominoes game, that you were like the champion. And I just love that because you still go and play dominoes every week now, right?
Well, it's a different game.
Oh, okay. But still, you're into dominoes.
Yeah.
What game do you play now?
We play something called Mexican Train.
Oh, I've played that with you before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are generally 8 or 9 of us on Saturday. I'll go today at 4:00. And,
here in a little bit.
Yeah, and we'll play probably till 7. Play 13 hands. It's a set of 12.
Wow. So y'all have a whole system.
And I'll do well to win once out of 10.
Yeah.
it's more a game of chance than a smart. You can use some strategy, but you generally play what you have to.
Yeah.
Last week, I finished absolute last.
Oh, no.
But then you may go and win 2 weeks in a row, and then may not win again for a year.
But y'all aren't betting anything now, right? You're just having fun.
We're just having fun. Just all of us are members of church members, and we just have a great time.
So going back to Jack and Lois and you and Vera, you met Vera pretty young, got married around 17.
Yeah, we were 17.
And you had your second child, Dan, my dad, 16 years after Uncle Jim was born.
Yeah.
And so how were things in your life at that time?
I was a mission pastor of the First Baptist Church in Dallas. Under W.A. Criswell was the pastor. It was a happy life, a happy time, a great time. Vera and I really prayed hard. When we married, she wasn't sure, the doctors weren't sure she could ever have children.
Really?
She'd had some problems. A lot of girls do, just internal problems for no reason anybody knows of. But we had Jim right off.
Yeah, yes, you did.
I know it was 9 months and 13 days because my mother counted them. but we prayed hard for Jim and for Dan to come along. And
so you were wanting a child.
We really wanted him. We didn't care. In fact, kind of suspected it was a girl, because in the house we lived, I painted the room a kind of a light lilac color, and had
that's so sweet.
Purple, darker lilac curtains.
Yeah.
Just thought it'd be a little girl.
Yeah.
So when Dan was born, I had to go repaint it all.
That's really sweet. What was it like having two sons that far apart?
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Jim just loved Dan.
Really?
In fact, as Dan was 2 or 3 years old and Jim had a car then, he would take him with him because he was a chick magnet. Girls would just hang around to see Dan.
Yeah. That's kind of funny because essentially at that age, Uncle Jim would have been the same age that you were when you had Jim.
Yeah, right.
And having a baby was kind of when you were in the Army, like I was reading some of the letters about my new son, and not everyone had children. And those of you who did, it was a really big deal. It was really exciting.
Yeah.
So for Uncle Jim to be walking around with a baby, that's funny.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he was, people were attracted to it.
The girl would hang around his car.
That's really cute. That's sweet.
And Dan was always delightful, always had a big grin, was a happy guy and very active, just like your kid, just as active as he could be.
Yeah, that's sweet.
And he loved his big brother. His big brother loved him. There was never a problem of any jealousy or anything. They loved each other from the start. And still do. It just thrills me that they stay in touch.
Yeah, what a great relationship.
Like they do.
Yeah, siblings can have really great relationships. So you were a pastor at that time. So my dad's told me about, some memories in Southern California. Can you talk about when y'all moved and kind of what the story is there?
I was a pastor in Farmers Branch at a church called Valwood Parkway. And we went to California. Vera had family in California. So many times we would take our vacation, drive out there and visit her family. It was a Christmas time. We just took off at Christmas time and went out to visit some of her family. And I had a friend out there, W.B. Bryant, who was an interim pastor at the First Southern Baptist Church at Huntington Park. He learned I was coming, and so he said, "Bill, I want to visit my family in Dallas. Will you preach for me this Sunday?" And I said, "Yeah." And so I preached for them. They didn't have a pastor. He was an interim pastor.
Oh.
And so that Sunday they said, "Would you stay and preach for us in view of a call to be our pastor?" And I said, "Yes."
Wow.
I'd always wanted to be on a mission field, and California is a mission field. And this just thrilled me. And so I stayed an extra week, called and made sure I had my pulpit covered at home. And I preached for them, and they called me as pastor after the service. And so I went home, went back and resigned, and 2 weeks later we moved to Southern California. Los Angeles is made up of about 20 little bitty towns.
Mm-hmm.
There's Los Angeles, but then there's a greater Los Angeles, all these little towns.
Yeah.
Huntington Park was right in the middle, and it was a beautiful city. It was small, but it had great department stores. It was a delightful city.
Yeah. What year was this? Okay.
1963. Dan was 2.
Okay.
And Jim did not move with us.
Mm-hmm.
He stayed with his grandmother.
Because he would have been 18 at that point.
He was still in high school. We were there close to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
In that time, there were some things happened in Los Angeles in the Watts area. They had riots.
Mm.
And that wasn't far from Huntington Park. We could hear the gunshots
Wow.
at night. And so almost overnight, Huntington Park died. The big department stores moved away.
Wow.
And so almost overnight, there were just thrift stores. And of course, the people were moving out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I resigned and went to another church.
Still in California.
In California.
So this is in the 60s. What were the riots going on?
Black people rioting. I guess just tired of being downcast.
Yeah, I mean, the 1960s
They were
in the United
downcast.
States, that's a big thing going on.
Vera's mother's sister, her aunt Jessie and uncle, they lived in Compton,
Mm-hmm.
where the Watts people were.
Mm-hmm.
And while we were in Huntington Park, we often went down there. We played 42 a whole lot at night with them. And
in the 60s, Compton was a pretty poor area.
very poor,
Yeah.
very poor,
Mm-hmm.
and hard for them to get jobs and all. Guess they felt oppressed.
Yeah. So where did you move to after Huntington?
A little town east part of Los Angeles called Baldwin Park, and I was there
Yeah.
for several years. And then I went to a church, First Southern Baptist Church at Glendale, California, which I thought I could help, but it was not a good church. There were people in there that fought, and I thought I could work it out, but I couldn't.
You've been in a lot of different churches and experienced a lot of
12 different churches.
12.
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't settle down until I went to Fresno.
Wow.
And at Glendale, they fought all the time. And I had just finally said to the Lord, I can't I'm not doing any good.
Yeah.
I can't even invite people to come to this church.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I said, when May is over and Dan's out of school, I'm going to move back to Dallas. If I have to get a job at a service station or something,
Yeah.
But in May, the First Southern Baptist Church at Fresno called me to be their pastor.
That's a pretty big church, isn't it?
They were in about 500. And the California Baptist offices were in Fresno.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot of the people that worked in that office, the guy who was over the state Sunday schools, the church training unions, they put out a paper, and the editor of the paper, a lot of those people were in my church.
Wow.
It was one of the first 7 churches, Southern Baptist Church in California.
Oh, wow.
It was started in 1941.
Yeah, wow.
And it was older and just as strong a church as it was. To me, it was the best church in California. And when I was in college, I had a pastor by the name of Paul Brooks Leith, who was pastor of the First Baptist Church there at Brownwood when I went to college. He had gone out and he had been pastor at First Southern Fresno.
Oh, really?
And so, boy, to follow him,
yeah.
I just felt like, God is so good.
That's really cool.
To make me a dream come true after all I've been through, the nightmare of Glendale.
Yeah, how great. That just fell into place.
I spent 10 years there.
10 years. Wow.
And even after I left, I went back for several times. They would call me back for certain things. And the pastor always would say, I don't care how long I'm here, you're always going to be their pastor.
That's so sweet.
10 years is a lot to spend with a guy.
Sure, a decade.
And I think I was 46 when I went there. And most of the people were about my age.
Really?
And so we kind of grew together.
And probably a lot had kids, and you did a lot of family things
together.
And
I'm still stay in touch with a lot of them, Christmas cards. And
that's great.
the guys that were growing up there, well, one of them even came to see us here.
Really? Here in Kerrville?
Yeah.
Wow.
A couple of years ago, we were so close. After that, I was called to be a home missionary. So I went out to the desert, the Mojave Desert, as a director of missions.
Where's the Mojave Desert?
Barstow. I don't know if you're looking at the calendar, but it's the eastern part of California.
Okay.
Southeastern part, and it's all desert.
Yeah. Like pretty desert, or is
it's
it
called
just
the high desert. They're mountains. It's mountain deserts.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Death Valley was in that area.
Oh, okay. I'm familiar with that.
So I had 26 churches that I serviced, the pastors, helping them in any way I could, as far as advice and any way to keep them in touch. And I was really good at this because I love pastors.
Well, you're good at talking and keeping up with relationships and knowing and getting to know people.
And really enjoyed it. The high point in California was there, the mountains. You could see Death Valley from there.
That's cool.
We often went, Dan and I often went to Death Valley.
Wow.
And it was really a great time.
Yeah.
Vera hated it.
Oh no.
She hated it.
Well, she probably missed her family.
Yeah, and it was lonely for her.
Sure.
I mean, I'm traveling, I'm seeing people all the time.
Uh-huh.
And she's just there at the house. She was acting as my secretary. Because I like the outdoors, the mountains and all.
Yeah.
And Dan, boy, he might still be there. Yeah. He really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Dune buggies.
Well, I hear about it all the time from
Dune
him.
buggies. And
yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But then same job at Tucson, Arizona came available.
So that was my next question is where did Tucson come in?
And so I had a friend that I had known in Los Angeles who was now the pastor of Emmanuel Church in Tucson, and he was head of the committee to find a new manager. He knew I had taken that job, so he called me. And while I was talking, his name was Wayne. While I was talking with Wayne, Vera said, "Tell him yes."
Oh, me, Mom.
she began to hear the part of the conversation. She tell him yes. So we went there.
That's what led you to Tucson.
Yeah. So we were director of missions in Tucson for 10 years.
What about Dan at that time? So did he move with you to Tucson?
No, he stayed. He had several jobs. He worked at car parts houses. He and his buddy, that he's still a buddy with, stayed with them, and they stayed in the house. I tried to sell the house.
Oh, y'all's house, the house that y'all lived in as a family. Okay.
And he stayed there until we sold it, but it was months and months and months later.
Sat there for a while.
And he never did. He would visit us in Tucson, but he always would visit on his way back to Dallas. He eventually moved back to Dallas and worked with and for Jim.
Okay. Yeah.
In car parts.
And meanwhile, while all this is happening, Uncle Jim's still in Dallas.
Yeah. He stayed in Dallas. He came out when we were at Huntington Park. He came out, probably spent a year with us.
Oh.
And he thinks of things nobody else thinks of. So when he came out, instead of hunting for a job, he went to used car lots and got them to hire him to fix used cars so they could resell them.
Okay, that's cool.
And so he would spend his time at these used car lots, pumping up tires and fixing brakes and doing whatever it took to make them. I mean, who would think of that?
Yeah.
That's an amazing thing to me.
And so you're in Tucson, you're preaching there, and you're there for about a decade. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So
I was a director of missions there for 10 years, and I retired when I was 65.
Yeah.
After 13 years there. And the First Southern Baptist Church of Tucson, which was a huge church, 700 or 800, called me to be their associate pastor. I worked with a beautiful, wonderful man called Ron Hart, was pastor. We became fast friends.
Really?
We shared the preaching and visited together. He was a real good soul winner. I enjoyed that. We would baptize 45, 50, 60 people a year.
Wow.
I mean,
y'all were a good team.
Yes, we were.
That's awesome.
We really were.
That's really cool.
And we bought a camp, had a camp up. We would have
Mount Lemmon.
In Mount Lemmon, we would have yearly camps up there.
I've been up there with you.
Yeah. And we had a great ministry there. And then after I'd been there, let's say 5 years, I was there 7 years. Ron got just disenchanted with ministry.
Hmm.
And he just resigned and left. He didn't have anything else to do. He just left. And so they called me to be what we call not the interim, but a pastor for the interim.
Oh.
Which means I was pastor.
Uh-huh.
Not just generally the interim pastor just preaches and he's there to take a little, but this means I was going to be the pastor.
Be the actual pastor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, his secretary became my secretary, and I moved into his office. We was there until 2 years later, in 1999, he came back. I mean,
wow.
A lot of the people never really let him go. He just burned out.
That's so interesting.
He just burned out.
Yeah.
And some of the guys kept up with him and called him, and he came back, which was fine with me.
And he was welcomed back.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone loved him.
He was welcome, as if he'd never left.
Yeah.
And I said, now, Ron, you're back, and I've been the pastor, changed some things. I think I'll just retire and move on. He said, no, stay at least a year with me. And so I stayed until 2000.
Okay. And how did that work? What was the pastor dynamic? You continued to be pastor?
No, he was the pastor.
He became the pastor
and
again.
I went back to my associate thing.
I see. So kind of just picked up where y'all had left off.
But it was really like they had two pastors, because in the meantime, I think I'm a good pastor.
I think so too.
I
think you are too.
I love people.
You do.
I really do.
And people love you.
And I'm a decent preacher.
Absolutely.
And
to put it lightly.
I did well.
Yeah.
There. And Ron enjoyed it. He didn't mind sharing.
Uh-huh.
Ron didn't have any jealous, and I don't either.
Well, this is how a lot of churches work now, is having multiple pastors.
We were in it together,
mm-hmm.
and I think it works well.
I think so too, because it's a lot of work.
I mean, Ron would say, why don't you do a series of sermons for the next 5 or 6 Sunday nights?
Mm-hmm.
Or why don't you take the next 2 Sunday mornings, because I've got a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we just shared it.
It's a good team.
We were co-pastors, actually.
Yeah.
I took back my position as associate pastor.
But that's how it worked. Yeah. Okay.
And then when I was in 2000, I just decided this is enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so I retired and moved to Canton,
Texas.
Yeah, and I was there. We moved there, I guess, in January.
So at this point, so this is in 2000. So at this point, my dad, Dan, has been in Texas, in Grand Saline. And
mm-hmm.
so was Jim at that point. He was in Grand Saline too. And
no, Jim was down here.
Oh, in South Texas.
Jim was down here in Kerrville.
Yeah, we're in Kerrville right now, Kerrville, Texas. So my dad, Dan, is married to my mom, Laura, and there's the two of us born, myself, Danlee, and my older sister, Micah. And also living with us is my brother, Cody, who's my mom's first child. Mm-hmm. So we lived in Grand Saline, and Canton is about 20 miles from Grand Saline. Is it 20?
Yeah, about
15?
About more like 12.
Oh, it takes like 20 minutes. Maybe that's what I'm thinking. Well, also, you weren't in Canton. You were right outside.
I was 5 miles out of Canton.
Kind of in a windy country area. Really fun time.
Was delightful.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful place.
Little country church, right about 75 in Sunday school.
Yeah.
Church. Well, I enjoyed it. It lets me do what I like to do. I got close to the people. Got to still study and preach, which I love to do.
Little Hope Baptist Church.
Little Hope Baptist Church.
Yeah, this was your retirement gig.
Yeah. And I was 72 when they called me.
Wow.
And I was there 14 years.
14 years.
14 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So I was a kid, and I remember the moving van, or the moving truck, the big truck from when y'all moved from Arizona, because we would go visit y'all in Arizona a lot as kids. It was just so much fun.
That was fun. That was a wonderful time.
We had the best time. Y'all had a beautiful house. And Mima was a real estate agent, Vera, at the time in Tucson.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so how did she kind of wrap up her business before y'all moved back to Texas?
Well, she had a heart attack.
Oh, right. Okay.
And this slowed her down pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it just about took her out of the real estate business and the driving business.
So did this kind of have a play in the whole you retiring and moving to Texas decision?
It may have. I didn't think so. I took care of her, of course, because she needed care. And but I don't think so. I think I just finally said I just need to retire. It was a God thing. God just seemed to say, Bill, I think it's time to move along.
Well, and as a child, I got to have my grandparents right there.
Right.
And we got to
and
go to church.
that was a fun time.
Oh, it was. And you would have, was it the Fagley family that would bring the horses out?
Yeah.
And we would get to ride
horses.
Right,
Andy Fagley.
So much fun. Yeah, we had a great time. I remember some Saturday mornings, because there wasn't church going on, we'd stay the night on a Friday, me and Micah, my older sister, and Saturday morning would come and you would give us the key to the church and we would go in there and play Sunday school in the Sunday school classrooms. The whole church is empty.
Yeah.
And we just thought that was the coolest thing, that we had the key to the church. We felt really neat.
That was a marvelous time. Most of my life was just, say, Glendale wasn't the greatest, but most of the time it was really good.
Well, that's pretty great, because not everyone can say that only a few years of their life wasn't that great.
Yeah,
you know?
it was good.
I mean, you even put a positive spin on being in foster care, like you definitely have a great spirit.
Well, it helped me because it got me, I could go to a home and be instantly at home.
Yeah.
I had to be.
Yeah.
So I could just go, and that first night I'm at home.
Yeah.
And I could go to a new church. This would help me to leave the old church with some sadness, but a new church, and I would be instantly at home.
Yeah, you're a good adaptable person.
It really helped me that everything in your life always works together for good.
It connects. Yeah.
Even though you may not like it at the time. Being a foster kid, I couldn't invite other kids to my house to play, my folks.
Right.
I didn't have that freedom to do that.
That other kids did have.
But other kids did have. And so I did a lot of pretending.
Yeah.
I didn't want everybody to know my folks don't get, they.
Little did you know that you were developing lifelong skills that would help you
I
throughout
had
the rest of your life.
idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
And the man I developed to be was because of the Bible and the Lord, not necessarily because here's a man I'm going to pattern my life.
Yeah.
So everything in it has all worked together for good.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so sweet.
It is sweet.
He's such a sweet man.
Yeah. I love talking with him, and just, emotion and the positive spin on his foster experience and all the hardships, but yet you have, you see the positive things in life and how it helped you. And I just think that's incredible.
I just think it's so sweet that he actually not only knows what he's been through, but able to process it and really know, like, I am the man I am today because of X, Y, and Z. And I think that's such a good quality in a lot of people or in somebody that a lot of people actually don't really have.
Absolutely. He has a lot more confidence in his stage of life and what he's experienced in life than a lot of people have, and it's very admirable. It's really easy to slip into a different path, of how you process everything life throws at you.
Right.
Yeah. So I love that.
I think that's a good lesson just in general, not for just myself listening, but hopefully anybody else that listens too, is, it really is a lot about your mindset. And he learned that from such an early age. I mean,
yeah, and
most people don't learn that.
He's going to be 97 in August.
That's amazing.
And here he is thinking back about his early childhood and just how it helped him throughout his entire life.
That's
I love
awesome.
it. Yeah.
He's so cool.
Yeah. Peepaw, we love you.
Yeah. Love you, Peepaw. I feel like an honorary member of your family.
Oh, you are. Absolutely.
It's been really fun listening to these. Of course, I wasn't there when you were able to record and everything, but it's it's just been awesome listening. And one of my favorite parts that made me giggle was talking about the couples traveling.
Oh, yeah.
Like him
talking about it.
Yeah, him and his best friend and their wives going off and sharing a hotel room, because we've definitely done that. I mean, we didn't put like a sheet between the beds or anything, but we've traveled together, and it's kind of like I'm definitely the third wheel, but we're like a trio when we travel.
Oh, we've shared hotel rooms.
Yeah. And your husband's basically like my brother, and you're my best friend. So it's like, it's just funny to hear that they did that and traveled together. Because I'm like, that's us.
Yes. Yeah. I definitely agree with you. They had those close friendships and did the fun things. And it's kind of fun to think about. Times were different, but also not in some ways, you know, like
friendship is friendship.
Yeah. We want to go somewhere, and we have a budget, and we're going to make it happen.
We're going to make it work. We are going to make it work no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. What I like about this episode so much is just listening to Bill talk about his life and journey and his career. And it's so cool to hear about like him jumping into it fresh out of the army, fresh out of these things and events that have gone on, and then following his dreams and making it happen and meeting amazing people along the way and raising kids.
Yeah. Well,
I love it.
And having his kids, 16 years apart?
Yeah.
So that your dad was the chick magnet.
I cannot even imagine that, you know, having kids a couple years apart. I'm like, I can't even imagine
16.
In 14 years, having more kids. What?
What?
You guys get an award. I also like this episode because I had some fun memories kind of in there. Like the key to the church, me and my sister, we got to stay the night at the parsonage, and literally me, mom, Peepaw would give us the keys, and we would go play Sunday school in the little classrooms and stuff, and we'd have the whole church, and we just thought we were the queens of the world.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
How long did that get to go on for?
Oh, that happened a lot.
Yeah.
Well, you know, everyone trusted us. Everyone knew us. We weren't
You weren't just banshees
random.
running around.
No, we were respectful. No one even probably ever noticed, because we were really cool about it. We didn't want to mess anything up or anything, but we loved doing that. We thought we were so cool, and I loved the whole time that they lived out there outside of Canton, because they were so close to us, and it was a great time for our family. So I loved hearing my people talk about it.
Yeah.
And then before that, when they moved from Arizona, those were amazing memories too. We went out there a lot, loved their home. We would go swimming in their pretty Arizona swimming pool.
No.
Go visit them on Mount Lemon, with the church camp. It was just so neat.
Mount Lemon?
Mm-hmm.
Are there lemons on the mountain?
I don't think so. I don't think so. But it's a pretty mountain.
I just am curious. I had to know.
Yeah, no, I love this episode. And the next episode is going to be great too, because he talks a little bit more about kind of his influence on his career and how college was for him and his wife, Vera, and how it was going through that with their first son, who was still very young, which to me is so great, because I've gone through college with child, and it was hard. So I just relate a lot. So it's cool hearing about that experience, and just kind of a lot of stuff that he studied and things like that made him such a phenomenal preacher.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
I can't wait to listen to that one too.
I can't wait too. Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time on the Experience Ship Podcast.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook.
And if you're feeling fancy, leave us a review wherever you stream.